When I agreed to host the New Year's Eve feast, I imagined a warm evening in my apartment in Cedar Grove, with laughter echoing against the tall windows, and my family actually appreciating the effort. I find that they will follow what they can and why. They don't feel sad. I'd planned everything weeks ahead: a roasted herb turkey, handmade dumplings, citrus glazed vegetables, and a dessert table that had already cost me more than I intended. The total came to about $1,100, money I wasn't thrilled to spend, but I told myself it was worth the memories. What I didn't expect was the group chat message 3 days before the event. My sister Julia casually wrote, "Since you're hosting anyway, Rachel can watch the kids so we can all relax. She's good with them." I stared at the screen, waiting for anyone, to correct her. Instead, my mother replied with a thumbs up. The total came to the good guy. Bell's camp on the bank. I swear my father, even though I was bad, I was fired. My brother added that it would be so nice not to worry about tantrums. As if I was some built-in service that came with the apartment. I typed several replies, deleted them, paste, then sat again. They weren't just asking me to help. They were assigning me the job, for free, on a holiday I was paying for. I read their messages again, the glow of my phone making the room feel colder than it was. They didn't even ask. They didn't even pretend it was optional. To them, it was obvious. I was the single one, the one without kids, the one who had time. Never mind that I worked full-time, or that I had been the one funding this entire celebration. In their eyes, being child-free meant being available. I finally typed, "I'm not babysitting during New Year's. I'm hosting, not running a daycare." I hit send before I could overthink it. Seconds later, Julia responded, "Why are you being dramatic?" Then my mother, Rachel, "It won't kill you to help your family." My brother chimed in, "We already told the kids you'd be watching them. Don't ruin the mood." Ruin the mood? I was paying for the entire mood. I leaned back on my couch, staring at the twinkling lights I'd hung earlier that day. Suddenly, they looked ridiculous, like decorations for a party I no longer wanted to host. I had opened my home and my wallet, and in return, they treated me like the cheapest option available. That was the moment, quiet, sharp, and oddly empowering, when I made my decision. I wasn't going to spend New Year's trapped in my bedroom while everyone else toasted champagne. I wasn't going to spend the night catering to a family that didn't respect me. I opened the group chat and typed, "The dinner is cancelled. I'll send refunds for whatever ingredients I already bought. Have a good New Year." Then I closed the chat before I could see the explosion I knew was coming. The first call came 20 seconds later, then the second. By the fifth one, I turned my phone on Do Not Disturb and tossed it onto the couch. I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped into changing my mind. Not this time. For the first time all month, my apartment felt peaceful. I walked into the kitchen and looked at the groceries I'd bought: premium steaks, fresh pastries from the bakery, bottles of sparkling cider, imported cheeses. I had imagined my family laughing around my table, enjoying the celebration I worked so hard to prepare. But the image had shifted now, twisted into something that looked more like a daycare center than a holiday party. And I was done being the designated helper. A new message preview appeared on my lock screen. Leah, my old childhood friend. We hadn't seen each other in months, but something about her name appearing right then felt like a sign. Her message read, "Hey Wretch, you busy for New Year's? I'm thinking of doing a little road trip up north. Cabins, snow, zero drama. Interested?" I stared at the words, stunned. It felt like the universe offering me an exit door. I typed back, "I just cancelled my family dinner. So, yes, I'm very interested." She replied with a string of excited emojis and the details. She'd pick me up New Year's Eve morning. We'd drive out to a small lakeside cabin she'd rented, cook simple food, watch movies, and just relax. It sounded perfect, simple, warm, drama-free. Everything my family was not. For the first time that day, I smiled. Maybe cancelling the dinner wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of doing things for myself. The rest of the evening felt strangely calm, as if I had stepped out of a storm and shut the door behind me. No shouting, no accusations, no expectations. Just the soft hum of my heater and the twinkling lights from the half-decorated tree in my living room. Still, guilt crept in around the edges. Not because I cancelled the dinner, I knew deep down that was the right call, but because I had spent years playing a role my family assigned me. The responsible one, the peacekeeper, the one who could handle it. And now that I wasn't playing along, they were losing their minds. By 9 p.m. I finally checked my messages again. There were 25 missed calls, a dozen texts from my sister, and 3 long voice messages from my mother. The guilt trip was in full swing. "I can't believe you'd ruin New Year's for everyone," she said in one message. "You know your sister can't enjoy herself with the baby. You're being selfish." I paused the recording. Selfish. The word hit harder than I wanted it to. But then I remembered standing in my kitchen, being told, without even the courtesy of asking, that I would be the free nanny for the night. That wasn't love. That wasn't respect. That was entitlement. And I refused to reward it anymore. My phone buzzed again, a new notification. But this time, it wasn't my family, it was Leah. "Got snacks, blankets, and the cheesiest holiday movies ready. Tomorrow is gonna be amazing." For the first time in years, I felt excited about New Year's Eve. No pretending, no babysitting, no walking on eggshells. Just me, a friend who actually cared, and a much-needed escape. I put my phone aside, lit a candle, and allowed myself to feel something rare. Freedom. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming across my bed, a welcome contrast to the usual knot of anxiety that had become my holiday companion. For once, I didn't dread checking my phone. I didn't brace myself for accusations or emotional landmines. I just stretched, breathed, and let the quiet settle into me. Of course, the peace didn't last long. As soon as I opened my messages, the chaos greeted me like a punch. My brother had now entered the group chat war. "Real mature. Mum's been crying all night because of you. You always make everything about you. It was just one night of helping out. You're unbelievable." One night? He had no idea how many holidays I had sacrificed, how many birthday parties I had spent stuck in hallways rocking crying babies while everyone else drank champagne, how many dinners I had missed because I was soothing someone else's kid. They weren't asking for help, they were demanding servitude. And suddenly, something inside me snapped. I typed a message, one I'd never had the courage to send before. "I'm not your nanny. I'm not your backup parent. I'm not responsible for your choices. If you want to celebrate without doing the actual work of parenting, that's on you, not me." I didn't add anger. I didn't add insults. Just truth. Then I hit send. And for a moment, I just stared at the screen, feeling my heartbeat slow instead of speed up. It felt good, like reclaiming a small part of myself I'd forgotten existed. No one replied. Not my mother, not my sister, not even my brother. Silence, not accusatory, not guilt-driven, but stunned. I set my phone down and got to work packing for my mini getaway. It felt strange, zipping clothes into a suitcase instead of prepping a meal big enough to feed a small army. Strange, but empowering. Leah texted just as I tossed in my last sweater, ready to escape. More than £1 million less. Sunshine. More than £1 million less. Days every day. As I locked my apartment door behind me, I felt a lightness I hadn't felt in years, like stepping out of an old version of myself, one who lived for everyone else's comfort but her own. This year, New Year's Eve wasn't going to be about obligations. It wasn't going to be about guilt or sacrifice. It was going to be about reclaiming my time, my peace, and my joy. For once, it was going to be about me. We hit the road just before noon, Leah blasting an old playlist we used to listen to during college road trips. The familiar beat instantly loosened something in my chest. I rolled down the window, letting the icy winter air rush in, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I actually laughed. Not a polite, socially acceptable laugh. A real one, loud, unfiltered, alive. Leah grinned. "There she is," she said, tapping the steering wheel. "I knew you were still in there somewhere. I didn't realize how much I needed someone to say that until she did." The cabin we booked was tucked away in the mountains of North Carolina, surrounded by quiet pines and untouched snow. When we pulled into the long gravel driveway, it felt like arriving in a different world, one where no one expected anything from me, where I didn't have to cook or clean or mediate arguments disguised as family gatherings. Inside, the cabin was warm and inviting. Fireplace, soft blankets, a tiny kitchen stocked with cocoa and tea. It felt like a place designed for healing. We spent the afternoon sipping hot chocolate, bundled in blankets, watching snowflakes drift past the windows. It wasn't glamorous or wild, it was peaceful, something my holidays had never been. By early evening, Leah pulled out a stack of board games and a bottle of sparkling cider. "Let's toast to your freedom," she said, popping it open with a grin. I lifted my glass. "To boundaries," I said. "To dignity," she added, "and to not babysitting on New Year's Eve." We clinked glasses and laughed again. But later that night, as we sat by the fire, my phone buzzed. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to protect the peace I'd chosen. The curiosity won. It was my mother. "We need to talk." My stomach tightened, not because I regretted my decision, but because I knew that message wasn't about understanding. It was about control wrapped in guilt. I didn't reply, not yet. Instead, I put my phone face down on the table and watched the flames. The crackling wood seemed to echo something inside me, something breaking down, burning away, making room for something new. Leah nudged me gently. "You okay?" I nodded. For the first time in a long time, and I meant it. The fire glowed warm and steady, and in that quiet mountain cabin, I realized something important. Choosing myself didn't make me selfish, it made me free. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, warming the wooden floors and gently waking me. For a moment, I forgot where I was. No noise, no rushing, no one calling my name to demand something. Just quiet. Leah was already in the kitchen, humming as she made coffee. "Morning, Princess of Boundaries," she teased, handing me a mug. I rolled my eyes but smiled. I could get used to this. We spent the morning hiking a short trail behind the cabin. The cold mountain air sharpened everything, my thoughts, my resolve, the simple truth that I hadn't done anything wrong by leaving. With each step, I felt the old version of myself loosening its grip. But of course, reality was waiting when we returned. 6 missed calls, 4 voicemails, 3 long texts from my sister, all variations of the same theme. "I can't believe you bailed. You ruined New Year's. Mom is furious. The kids keep asking where you are." Each word was a tug toward the old cycle: guilt, obligation, the expectation that I'd swallow mistreatment because it made things easier for everyone else. I felt the familiar pressure rising, but before it could take root, Leah plucked the phone out of my hands and tossed it onto the couch. "Nope, not today," she said firmly. "You are allowed to enjoy your life." I exhaled slowly, almost shakily. "I know. It's just, they always make it sound like I ruined everything. That's because you stopped letting them use you," she said. "People don't like losing their favorite free service." Her bluntness made me laugh, because it was true, and hearing someone say it out loud made all the difference. We made lunch, played more games, and then spent the late afternoon journaling by the fire. I wrote down everything I'd been afraid to admit. I'm tired of being everyone's caretaker. I'm tired of being the good daughter. I'm tired of sacrificing myself for people who don't notice or appreciate it. I'm tired of being told I should be grateful just to be included. By writing it, I gave myself permission to acknowledge how heavy it had been. Around sunset, as golden light filtered into the cabin, I finally said the words out loud. I don't want to go back to how things were. Leah looked at me, not with surprise, but with relief. Good, because you shouldn't. As night fell, we made a simple dinner and curled up with a movie. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't dramatic, but it felt like the first real holiday I'd had in years. Calm, warm, and mine. Just before midnight, fireworks echoed softly in the distance, their colors flashing faintly through the windows. I closed my eyes and made a quiet promise to myself. This year, I choose peace. This year, I choose respect. This year, I choose me. And as the clock struck 12, I realized something profound. I didn't just cancel a New Year's feast. I cancelled years of being taken for granted. I cancelled my role as the unpaid nanny. I cancelled expectations that drained me dry. And as the new year began, I finally felt ready, truly ready, to start fresh. Morning came with soft rain tapping against the cabin roof, a steady rhythm that made the world feel gentler. I stretched, wrapped myself in a blanket, and stepped outside onto the small porch. The mountain fog drifted between the trees, and for the first time in forever, I breathed without feeling weighed down. Leah joined me with 2 mugs of hot chocolate. How'd you sleep? Better than I have in years, I admitted. It feels like my brain finally shut up. We spent the morning quietly, reading, snacking, letting the hours slip by without obligation. But around noon, my phone buzzed again. This time it was my brother. A long message appeared. Mum says you embarrassed the whole family. Everyone thinks you're being dramatic. You owe her an apology for ruining New Year's. We were counting on you. I stared at the words, stunned by the irony. Counted on me to work for free. To handle their kids, to make the night flawless while they enjoyed themselves, to pretend that their version of family was normal. Leah saw my expression. Trouble? Just the usual guilt package, I muttered. But something inside me had shifted. I typed back slowly, deliberately. I'm not apologizing for setting boundaries. I'm not responsible for hosting or babysitting. And I'm not coming home early. Enjoy the holiday. I hit send before I could overthink it. For the first time, answering them didn't make me feel scared or guilty. It made me feel steady. Leah gave a quiet smirk. Look at you. Growth. I chuckled. Feels weird, but good. To distract me, she suggested we make our own mini New Year's meal. Pancakes, bacon, fruit, the works. We cooked side by side, laughing until my stomach hurt when Leah dropped an entire stick of butter on the floor and blamed gravity being aggressive today. While we ate, my phone buzzed again. This time, a message from my mother. I cannot believe how selfish you are. Your sister is crying. The kids are upset. You should have made the sacrifice, Rachel. That's what family does. I shook my head and whispered the words out loud. That's what I do. No one else. And that was the truth. Everyone expected something from me. Effort, time, money, childcare, emotional labor. No one offered anything back. Not support, not gratitude, not respect. Leah reached over and squeezed my hand. You're doing the right thing, I nodded, letting the validation sink in. Yeah, I think. I finally believe that. The rest of the day unfolded peacefully. We explored a nearby antique shop, bought matching mugs with cheesy mountain quotes, and took a long scenic drive with music blasting and windows cracked just enough to let in the crisp air. By the time we returned to the cabin, something inside me felt cleaner, lighter. I wasn't running away from my family. I was stepping toward myself, and that difference mattered more than anything else. As night settled in and the fireplace crackled softly, I felt a certainty I'd never had before. I wasn't going back to being the family's convenient afterthought. I wasn't going back to being their go-to babysitter. I wasn't going back to sacrificing my holidays, my time, or my well-being. This New Year's wasn't ruined. It was reclaimed. Midnight approached slowly, like the world was giving me extra time to understand the lesson of this whole mess. Leah and I sat on the couch, wrapped in blankets. watching a cheesy countdown show that felt far less dramatic than the New Year's Eve I was supposed to be hosting back home. At 11:40 p.m., my phone buzzed again, this time with a video call. My sister. I hesitated, but curiosity won. I answered. Her face appeared instantly, blotchy from crying, and framed by chaos, kids running around, my parents arguing loudly in the background, and a half-burned roast sitting on the counter like a crime scene. She didn't even say hello. Are you happy now? She snapped. Everything is ruined. Mum's been cooking all day, and the kids won't stop fighting, and Dad's mad because we couldn't get the timing right. You should have been here. I stared at her. For once, I didn't feel guilty. I just felt tired. You mean, I said calmly, I should have been there to fix everything. She rolled her eyes. You're the organized one. You know how to keep the kids calm. You know how to make the table look good. Why couldn't you just show up? My voice stayed steady, because none of you ever show up for me. Her expression faltered, just for a second, like she heard the truth but didn't want to admit it. Rachel, stop. You're being selfish. The kids needed you. No, I corrected her. You needed me to babysit. Again, for free, during a holiday I was supposed to host. Her lips tightened, and she lowered her voice. You're being dramatic. There it was, the family favorite line, the one they used any time I tried to defend myself. I exhaled slowly. You know what's dramatic? Expecting one person to carry an entire family's emotional labor, expecting me to put my needs last every single time. My sister opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Leah leaned closer on the couch, just enough that my sister saw her presence. Oh, my sister said sharply. So, now you're too busy with your little getaway to care about your family. I didn't react to the tone. I just spoke the truth. I care, but I'm done being used. For a brief moment she looked stunned, then angry, then oddly defeated. Fine, she muttered. Enjoy your little vacation. She ended the call abruptly, leaving the screen dark. I set my phone down, feeling a strange mix of sadness and relief. Leah glanced at me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah. I just finally said what I should have said years ago. We sat in silence, the kind that feels like comfort instead of tension. As the countdown reached the final minute, Leah leaned her head on my shoulder. New year, she said softly. New boundaries. New me, I added. The final seconds ticked by. 10, 9, 8. And when the clock struck midnight and the fireworks burst across the screen, I closed my eyes and made a quiet promise to myself. This year, I will not shrink to make others comfortable. I will not sacrifice myself for people who see me as a convenience. I will choose peace, even if it means choosing distance. It was the first New Year's in my adult life where I didn't feel obligated to please anyone, just myself. And that felt more powerful than any celebration I could have hosted. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the guest room in soft gold, warming the blankets and the quiet air. For once, I didn't wake up to a barrage of notifications or a mental checklist of tasks I needed to complete before disappointing someone. I woke up, rested. Leah was already in the kitchen brewing coffee, humming along to an old soul playlist. When she saw me, she smiled in that subtle, knowing way she always had. Sleep okay? She asked. Better than I have in months, I admitted. She handed me a mug. Good. You deserve a morning that doesn't start with chaos. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, inhaling the smell. I think I needed this trip more than I realized. Leah raised an eyebrow. You mean the escape from a family that treats you like a utility rather than a person? I smirked reluctantly. Yeah, that. She sat across from me, pulling her hair into a loose bun. You know, Rachel, your family's behavior isn't normal. It may be familiar, but it's not normal. I know, I said softly, but it's hard to see it clearly when you've spent your whole life being told their needs matter more. And now? She asked. Now. A small, unexpected smile tugged at my lips. Now I see it. Really see it. And I think I'm finally ready to stop pretending everything's fine. Leah nudged my foot with hers. Good. Because last night, that wasn't just standing your ground. That was you taking your life back. Her words settled over me like a warm blanket. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed again, a string of new messages. I expected more guilt-tripping, accusations, passive-aggressive commentary. But no, this time it was pictures. Photos of the disastrous New Year's feast, the burned roast, the lopsided decorations, kids crying, my mother slumped in a chair with a defeated expression, my dad yelling at someone off camera, my sister's husband holding two screaming toddlers. Plates unwashed, candles melted sideways, a spilled bottle of champagne forming a sticky puddle. The caption under it all, from my sister, "This is what happens when you abandon your family." I stared at it, waiting for the guilt to kick in. But nothing came. Instead, I let out a small laugh, genuine, surprised. Leah leaned over my shoulder and snorted. "They created that disaster all by themselves. You had nothing to do with it." "Exactly," I said. "But they still want me to clean it up." My sister sent one more message. "So, when are you coming home?" I put the phone face down on the table. "I'm not," I said. "Not today. Maybe not for a long time." Leah nodded approvingly. "Good." I took another sip of coffee, letting the peace settle deeper into my bones. For once, I wasn't running toward a crisis to save everyone. I wasn't running at all. I was simply choosing myself. And that felt revolutionary. The rest of the day unfolded slowly, unhurried, almost luxuriously. We wandered down a snowy trail near the lake, our boots crunching against the frost, leaving footprints that would be swallowed by the next falling snow. The air was sharp and clean, every breath reminding me that I wasn't carrying the weight of anyone else's expectations. Leah and I talked about everything: our jobs, our dreams, the absurdity of our families, and the little ways we both learned to survive in households that didn't always see us. For once, I felt heard. I didn't have to defend or justify my choices. I didn't have to perform gratitude. I could just be. Later, we returned to the cabin and made a casual dinner, simple pasta with fresh tomatoes and garlic, paired with a bottle of cheap but comforting wine. No one cared if it was perfect. There were no harsh whispers about presentation, no rolling eyes at missing garnishes. We ate slowly, savoring the flavors, laughing at inside jokes, and watching the sun dip below the snow-covered trees. Afterwards, we curled up on the couch with blankets and movies. For the first time, in as long as I could remember, I wasn't multitasking, mediating, or worrying. I was entirely, wholly present. I felt a subtle shift inside me, a growing confidence that I could exist fully for myself without guilt. It was new and unfamiliar, but freeing. At one point, Leah glanced over, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Rachel, do you realize you just did something huge? You stood up, you said no, you cancelled a holiday that everyone else was counting on to use you, and you survived it." I smiled quietly, because she was right. I had survived. I had navigated the emotional backlash, the guilt-tripping messages, the subtle manipulations, and I had come out stronger. For the first time, my needs weren't secondary. For the first time, my voice mattered as much as anyone else's. Later, as night fell and the cabin settled into silence, I pulled out a notebook and wrote. I chronicled the events of the past 24 hours, my feelings, my revelations, and my resolutions. Writing made the lessons tangible. I wrote down everything I had learned about boundaries, self-respect, and the power of choosing myself without shame. It felt like mapping out a new life, one that was no longer dictated by others' expectations, but by my own sense of worth. By the time I set the notebook aside, the fire had burned down to glowing embers, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. The journey ahead wasn't going to be easy. Setting boundaries with family is never simple. But I now had a taste of what was possible. I had tasted freedom, and I wasn't willing to let it go. The following morning, I woke up to a light dusting of snow covering the cabin roof and the trees outside. The world felt peaceful, untouched, and new, like it had been waiting for me to notice it. I brewed another cup of coffee, savoring the steam and warmth, and sat on the porch, watching the frost shame, and slow and sadly. But do I say that this is mine? There was a stillness that reminded me how rare moments like this were, when I was constantly entangled in family obligations. Leah joined me with a thermos of hot chocolate, smiling knowingly. "You're glowing," she said. "I think this freedom thing suits you." I chuckled, feeling a wave of relief wash over me. "It's amazing." I didn't realize how trapped I'd been. We talked quietly about plans for the day, a small hike, a visit to a local market, and later, a slow evening with more movies and baking. The simplicity of it was comforting. No schedules, no responsibilities beyond ourselves, just two friends reclaiming time that had been stolen for far too long. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed again. A message from my mother appeared. "Are you serious? You're still gone. The kids are asking for you. You need to come home and fix this." For a split second, I felt the old tug of guilt, but it was weaker now, almost laughable. I had tasted what it felt like to prioritize my own well-being. I typed a simple response, carefully measured. "I am taking care of myself. I will return when I am ready. Please understand that this is not about the kids, it's about my boundaries." Leah peeked over, raising an eyebrow. "Bold move. Necessary," I replied. "I can't keep putting myself last." By midday, we were back on the trail, crunching snow beneath our boots, the cold air clearing my mind. With each step, I felt lighter, more centered, and more confident in my decision to step away. The world wasn't waiting to punish me for saying no. It was waiting for me to live fully, unapologetically, for myself. That evening, as we baked cookies and laughed at our inevitable messes, I felt a sense of closure. Not because the conflict with my family had disappeared, they would always have opinions, but because I had claimed my agency. I had the power to say no, to step back, and to protect my energy. When night fell, and the cabin was quiet, I sat by the fire, reflecting. The lessons were clear. Boundaries are not selfish, and protecting yourself is not betrayal. The true gift of this New Year's wasn't a party or a meal. It was discovering that I could stand up for myself and still be whole. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to carry that strength back into the world, knowing that my peace was worth more than any expectation or obligation imposed by others. The next morning, the cabin was blanketed in fresh snow, soft and silent. I woke up slowly, letting the quiet sink in before even opening my phone. The previous year's chaos, shouting, guilt trips, unpaid labor disguised as family obligations, felt distant, almost like a different lifetime. For once, I didn't feel like I was running to fix everything for everyone else. Instead, I was running towards something I had long neglected, my own peace. Leah was already in the kitchen, humming a cheerful tune as she made breakfast. She slid a plate of pancakes toward me with a grin. "Fuel for the liberated," she said. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. As we ate, we talked about plans for the day. A walk along the frozen lake, a stop at the small market in town, and perhaps a movie marathon by the fireplace. It wasn't extravagant, but the absence of pressure made every moment richer. Each choice was ours, not dictated by obligation or expectation. Around mid-morning, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it briefly and froze. It was my mother, again. Another string of messages demanding I return, questioning my selfishness, claiming I had ruined the holiday. Normally, my chest would tighten, anxiety flooding my body. But this time, the messages felt like background noise. I typed a calm, firm reply. "I am taking care of myself. I will return when I am ready. This is about boundaries, not punishment. Please respect that." Leah appeared at my screen. "Look at you, standing your ground." I smiled faintly, feeling a mix of pride and relief. The old Rachel would have panicked, apologized, and tried to repair the chaos she didn't create. This Rachel was learning something new. Self-respect wasn't negotiable. We laced up our boots and stepped into the snow, the crisp mountain air filling my lungs and clearing my mind. Each step felt deliberate, each breath a reminder that I could survive without bending to unreasonable demands. The world wasn't waiting to punish me for prioritizing myself. It was a vast, quiet space, ready to be explored on my own terms. By evening, we returned to the cabin with rosy cheeks and wind-tangled hair. We lit the fireplace, brewed tea and baked cookies, making a cozy mess together. For the first time in years, I wasn't exhausted from managing everyone else. I was content simply existing, and it was intoxicating. As night fell, I reflected on the journey that had led me here. Canceling the New Year's feast had felt like rebellion, but it had become much more, a reclaiming of time, energy, and self-worth. I realized that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary. They preserve what makes us whole and allow us to show up for others without losing ourselves. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the silence from my family. Their disapproval no longer dictated my feelings. I had discovered something far more valuable than their approval: peace, clarity, and autonomy. And in that quiet mountain cabin, I understood that the new year was not just a calendar change. It was the start of a life where I chose myself, unapologetically and fully. The following morning, sunlight filtered through the frost-covered windows, casting golden streaks across the cabin floor. I woke to a stillness I hadn't felt in years. No demands, no lists, no anxious thoughts about what I should be doing for anyone else. Just me, the warmth of the cabin, and the scent of pine from the surrounding forest. Leah had already brewed coffee and poured it into mugs, carrying them to the living room. "Here's to another day of freedom," she said, placing one mug in my hands. The warmth seeped into my fingers, into my chest, and into my resolve. We spent the morning in quiet companionship, reading and talking, laughing softly at memories from our college days. It was the simplicity of presence that felt so restorative. The old patterns of guilt and over-responsibility didn't exist here. The cabin, the snow, the quiet, and Leah's unwavering support created a bubble where I could breathe fully and think clearly. By late morning, I decided to reflect on the family dynamics that had trapped me for so long. I realized the holiday chaos wasn't about my incompetence. It wasn't even about me personally. It was about expectations, control, and taking advantage of the person in the family who had the biggest heart and the least self-protection. I had been the default caretaker for years, silently absorbing stress and responsibility. But now, with distance and perspective, I saw the truth clearly. I deserved more than servitude, disguised as familial love. Around noon, Leah suggested we take a drive to a nearby town. We bundled up, the cold air biting our cheeks as we got into the car. The drive was liberating, the windows down, music blasting, laughter echoing through the car. The world felt expansive, and I felt expansive with it. Each mile carried me farther from the toxic cycles I had endured, and closer to a version of myself that existed for me, not for others. We explored a small local market, picking up fresh pastries and handmade crafts. I allowed myself small indulgences without guilt: a hand-knitted scarf for myself, a jar of local honey, a few candles to brighten the cabin when we returned. Every choice, no matter how trivial, reinforced my autonomy. Back at the cabin, the snow had thickened, covering the roof and surrounding trees in a pristine white blanket. We brewed tea, lit the fireplace, and sat in companionable silence, watching the snowflakes drift down. For the first time, I realized that my happiness didn't require anyone's validation or approval. It didn't require performing labor or pleasing people who would never appreciate it. That night I journaled, documenting the clarity and strength I felt. I wrote down the lessons I had learned, the power of boundaries, the necessity of saying no, the importance of self-preservation, and the joy of reclaiming personal time. The act of writing made the transformation real. I was not the same Rachel who had left home to escape the holiday chaos. I was a woman standing firmly in her autonomy, understanding that choosing herself was not only right, it was vital. As I drifted to sleep that night, the cabin quiet around me, I felt a deep, steady peace. I wasn't afraid of what my family might say or do. I knew I had discovered a truth that couldn't be shaken. My life, my time, and my well-being were mine to protect, no matter what anyone else demanded. The next morning, the sun rose pale and bright over the snow-covered forest. I woke with a sense of calm that I hadn't experienced in years. No rushing, no obligations, just quiet, reflective solitude. Leah was already up, preparing a simple breakfast, and smiled as I joined her in the kitchen. We ate slowly, savoring the warmth of coffee and the softness of pancakes fresh from the pan. Conversation was easy, unforced, filled with laughter and memories, rather than tension and complaints. Every moment reinforced the contrast between this life and the one I had left behind, where my needs were ignored and my energy exploited. After breakfast, we decided to take another walk, venturing further along a trail we hadn't explored before. The snow crunched beneath our boots, the air sharp and invigorating. With each step, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The burdens I had carried, guilt, resentment, obligation, were no longer mine to bear. I was reclaiming myself, one deliberate choice at a time. During the walk, I reflected on the lessons of the past few days. The cancelled New Year's feast, the messages from my family, the confrontation with my sister, all had been catalysts for this transformation. I realized that boundaries were not merely defensive, they were liberating. They allowed me to protect my energy, honor my feelings, and exist without constant compromise. By midday, we returned to the cabin, where the sunlight streamed through frost-covered windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. We brewed tea, curled up in blankets, and continued our quiet activities. I read a book, journaled, and reflected on the woman I had become over these short days. The courage to say no, to step away, and to prioritize myself had unlocked a freedom I had never known. Later, Leah and I made a small dinner, laughing as we fumbled with the ingredients. There was no expectation, no critique, just two friends sharing warmth and comfort. I realized that joy could exist without approval, that peace could thrive without conflict, and that my life didn't have to revolve around performing for anyone else. As night fell, I sat by the fire, the soft crackle filling the room, and contemplated returning home. But now, the thought of going back to family obligations didn't fill me with dread. It simply reminded me of the lessons I had learned and the strength I had gained. I knew I could return on my terms, not theirs, and maintain the autonomy I had fought to reclaim. For the first time, I felt fully empowered. I had learned that choosing myself was not selfish, it was necessary. And as I watched the snow settle silently outside, I promised myself that this year and every year forward, I would honor that truth. The next morning, the cabin was bathed in a soft golden light. Snow blanketed the forest floor, untouched and pristine, mirroring the clarity I felt inside. I woke slowly, taking my time to stretch and breathe, savoring a freedom that had been elusive for so long. The absence of obligations, expectations, and guilt created a rare space to just exist, fully and unapologetically. Leah had prepared breakfast again, the aroma of fresh coffee filling the small cabin. We ate in companionable silence, enjoying the simplicity of a morning unburdened by demands. The chatter of family, the tension of unresolved responsibilities, and the endless mental checklist I usually carried were nowhere in sight. For the first time, I realized that peace wasn't something I had to fight for, it was something I could step into, simply by honoring myself. After breakfast, we decided to explore a nearby trail we hadn't ventured down before. The snow crunched beneath our boots, the cold air invigorating, and the quietness of the forest seemed almost sacred. With every step, I felt further from the entanglements of my family and closer to the life I wanted for myself. I reflected on the events that had led me here: the cancelled New Year's feast, the confrontation with my sister, the messages demanding compliance. Each had been painful, but they had also been necessary. They had pushed me to recognize the patterns that no longer served me and to assert my boundaries without apology. By afternoon, we returned to the cabin and settled by the fireplace. I pulled out my journal, documenting the past days and the emotional journey I had undergone. Writing allowed me to process the lingering guilt and to affirm the strength I had discovered. I wrote about the power of saying no, the courage required to stand firm against expectations, and the liberation that came from prioritizing my own needs. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the snow-covered trees, we cooked a simple dinner together, laughing and savoring each bite. There was no judgment, no hierarchy, just companionship and mutual respect. I realized that this was the kind of connection I deserved, one where my worth was acknowledged and my choices were respected. As night settled, I sat alone by the window, watching the snow fall silently. My phone remained untouched. Messages from my family, full of expectation and blame, no longer held power over me. I had established a boundary that could not be crossed. I had discovered a strength that was entirely my own. For the first time in years, I felt complete. I knew that returning home did not mean sacrificing my autonomy. I could engage with my family on my own terms, with clarity and confidence, without losing myself. This New Year's had not been about a feast or celebration. It had been about reclaiming my life, my time, and my peace. And in that quiet moment, I made a promise to myself: never again would I let guilt or obligation dictate my worth. I had discovered that freedom was not about escaping others. It was about standing firm in my own truth. And that truth, unwavering and clear, would guide every choice I made from this day forward. The final day of our getaway arrived quietly, without fanfare or urgency. The cabin felt warmer somehow, not just from the fire or the sunlight streaming through the windows, but from a sense of peace that had been hard-won. I woke to the soft light filtering in and lingered in bed for a few moments, savoring the rare luxury of unhurried time. Leah had already started breakfast, the smell of coffee and fresh bread filling the space. I joined her at the table, and for a few moments, we simply sat, drinking in the calm and letting the silence speak. It was extraordinary to experience a morning without tension, a morning where I didn't have to anticipate someone else's anger or disappointment. Over breakfast, we talked about plans for when I returned home. I realized that the power I had discovered wasn't limited to this trip. Boundaries, self-respect, and the courage to prioritize myself could travel with me. I could go back to my family, interact with them, and maintain my autonomy without guilt. The lesson of this New Year's was not to escape life, but to live it fully on my terms. After breakfast, we packed our bags slowly, moving deliberately, giving ourselves time to absorb the last moments of the retreat. As I zipped up my coat and adjusted my scarf, I reflected on the journey I had undertaken in just a few days. What had begun as a cancelled feast had evolved into a profound lesson in self-preservation and empowerment. I had faced guilt, conflict, and expectation, yet I had emerged with clarity and strength. Leah smiled at me as we stepped outside. "You're different now," she said. "Stronger, more grounded." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. I've realized that standing up for myself doesn't make me selfish, it makes me human. The drive back to the city was quiet, filled with reflection rather than dread. I thought about my family's messages, my sister's anger, and my parents' expectations. None of it could take away what I had learned. For the first time, I understood that my happiness and peace were not negotiable. I could return to them, engage if I chose to, but only on terms that honored my boundaries. That evening, I arrived home, the familiar sights no longer triggering anxiety or guilt. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift. Messages awaited me, but I no longer felt obligated to respond immediately. I had reclaimed my voice, my agency, and my time. As I settled in for the night, I reflected on the journey. The cancelled New Year's feast, the confrontation, the getaway. It had all been a necessary series of steps towards self-discovery. I had learned that boundaries are not a form of rebellion, but a form of survival and respect for oneself. Lying in bed, I felt a deep sense of peace. The past years of accommodating, overextending, and suppressing my needs were behind me. Ahead lay a year and a life where I could choose myself first without apology. I drifted to sleep with a quiet smile, knowing that this was only the beginning of a life lived fully, deliberately, and free from undue guilt.